In less than 2 hours, Democrats will share a stage and debate in South Carolina. And Michael Bloomberg, he'll have one more chance here to defend his record, especially regarding stop and frisk. Tonight, the judge who ruled on that case that overturned that policy, she joins us to weigh in on that and also how the former mayor has handled the backlash over it. Then, as the coronavirus spreads, there are new fears that the Trump administration is not equipped to deal with it if things get worse, like many fear. We're going to show you why many people are saying this is a legitimate concern. Then the Trump administration, they're continuing to slash the social safety net, which hurts people who can least afford it. We're going to show you the latest moves that are impacting millions of people, and not in a good way. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. At 8 p.m. tonight, Democrats will take the stage in Charleston in their final debate before Saturday's South Carolina primary. Bernie Sanders, he's expected to have a target on his back as he's the clear front runner going into the contest. But Michael Bloomberg, he'll also likely take a lot of heat with stop and frisk once again being a major topic. Bloomberg is expected to go on offense tonight, which would be in stark contrast to last week when he was unsteady and on his heels.
I thought that my first responsibility was to give people the right to live. That's the basic right of everything. And we adopted a policy which had been in place, the policy that all big police departments use of stop and frisk. I've apologized, I've asked for forgiveness, but the bottom line is that we stopped too many people.
But Bloomberg's competitors, particularly both Warren and Sanders, are continuing to pile on.
Regardless of how much money a multi-billionaire candidate is willing to spend on his election, we will not create the energy and excitement we need to defeat Donald Trump if that candidate pursued, advocated for, and enacted racist policies like stop and frisk, which cause communities of color in his city to live in fear.
And now, the federal judge who issued the ruling saying stop and frisk violated the constitutional rights of people of color is weighing in. Former district court judge Shira Scheindlin, she penned a piece in the Times recently, and I'm going to quote a portion of it now for you. Quote, "I'm convinced that Mayor Bloomberg believed that the stop and frisk policy, which began under Rudy Giuliani but grew significantly during Mr. Bloomberg's tenure, was protecting African Americans who were disproportionately the victims of crime. This is misguided because a stop based on racial profiling instead of reasonable suspicion is unconstitutional. But this does not mean he hates black people. The most I can say is he had a pure heart but an empty head." Judge Scheindlin, she joins us now. Your Honor, thank you for the time. And I'm curious, when you looked through all the data and all the findings and you saw the accounts that obviously the mayor was privy to as well through his police department, there's obviously the legal angle that this was justice unfairly applied to a particular race of people in a particular zip code. But were even you surprised that when the practice ended that the crime rate continued to go down? Because clearly the mayor was.
I was delighted because after my ruling came out in August of 2013, the mayor and the police commissioner and the city's lawyer all said the city's going to blow up, crime is going to rise because this judge stopped the practice. And thankfully they were wrong, because every judge worries that her opinion will have consequences. And for all I knew, they were right, but they were wrong. And I was delighted that crime did not rise. In fact, it stayed steady or continued to drop. So that was a good thing. But what it also showed to me is that in hindsight, the practice is not what was causing crime to drop. The problem that they had is they were confusing cause and effect. They assumed that crime was dropping because of the policy, but the fact that it didn't go up when the policy ended probably shows that that was not the reason it dropped in the first place.
You know, like you, I heard what the mayor said in 2015 at that Aspen Institute, and
right.
Okay, granted, there is so many problems. I covered extensively all the issues that were attached to stop and frisk with the personal stories about, I remember one college kid literally stopped 8 times going to and from the subway to his apartment over the course of a couple months just simply because he lived, I guess, in the wrong neighborhood according to the NYPD. That all said, when he said what he did at the Aspen Institute, and I want to give him the benefit of the doubt, you wonder if he learned the lesson, especially with the benefit of obviously the data that came out. What was your reaction when you heard that audio?
Well, I was disappointed when I heard it that as late as 2015, he was still repeating what he believed at the time that the practice was happening, which was the idea that if you send the signal that you're going to be stopped whenever you leave your house, you will leave your guns at home, or you will leave whatever other weapon you might have at home, and crime will drop. I was surprised that he was still repeating what the police commissioner, I think, believed. And I think to some extent Bloomberg was believing or in sync with what the police department wanted. I think the police department, more than the mayor, was the driving force here. Although, of course, the buck stops at the top, and he's a data guy, and he knew the data. But nonetheless, I think that's why I said pure heart, empty head in that context. I never meant to say that this was a man who is an empty head. He's a very smart man. I meant only with respect to the stop-and-frisk policy, that I think he meant well in terms of protecting African-American victims, but I think he never saw the other side of the ledger. He never saw the pain inflicted on the individuals stopped.
And as you penned in your piece, I think really well, if you look at in toto, his record for New York and beyond, and where he has put his money, let alone his words, the entire picture you said he has atoned for that unforgivable policy that he kept in place and even expanded.
Exactly right. I have said, and I repeat here, that I think that the stop-and-frisk policy was unforgivable. So I don't forgive him. But I do think that if you look at the man's entire record, both as mayor and in his post-mayoral years as a philanthropist, I think that, again, it's a balance sheet, and the balance sheet now tips, I think, in his favor, despite this one blind spot that he had. He just didn't get this right. But everybody is flawed in one way or another. This is his Achilles heel. This is his flaw. There are a couple other things that have come out. I don't think they're as disqualifying as this one. This is the big one to me, but I don't find it disqualifying. There's a difference between unforgivable and disqualifying.
Anyone who read your piece knows that you do believe the current occupant of the White House, though, has done some disqualifying things, particularly on those subjects of race. Anyone who remembers in New York what he said about the Central Park Five, he would have had them executed, and we now know they were wrongly accused and convicted, and obviously in Charlottesville, where he said very fine people with torches calling for basically deaths to people of color.
And those were Right, and those were only the two examples I wrote about, but I think there's plenty of other things he has said or done, referring to certain countries as the word we can't say, blank hole countries. I mean, he has shown himself to be a racist, I think, throughout his tenure as president, and probably the years before that too, when I didn't pay much attention to him. Why should I? He was a real estate guy. But in the years that he's been in the public eye, I'm pretty convinced that this man, in fact, is a racist.
You're the perfect person to talk about this next subject, which is, for me, and I've had a lot of folks, including from your old stomping ground over at the SDNY, really concerned about not only the rule of law, but the attack on the judiciary in this country. I want to play, for folks who missed it, what the president had to say about both Justices Sotomayor and also Justice Ginsberg. And I'll get to specifically their complaint in a second, but listen to what he had to say.
I just don't know how they can not recuse themselves for anything having to do with Trump or Trump-related. The right thing to do is that. Now, as a Supreme Court justice is a different standard, but at the same time, I think it's a higher standard in a certain sense. So they'll have to decide what to do.
If I could, I want to read the quote from my audience as part of the dissenting opinion from Justice Sotomayor. Right. She said, claiming one emergency after another, the government has recently sought stays in an unprecedented number of cases, demanding immediate attention and consuming limited court resources in each. And with each successive application, of course, its cries of urgency ring increasingly hollow. It's hard to say what's more troubling, that the government would seek this extraordinary relief seemingly as a matter of course, or that the court would grant it. And to give everyone a frame of reference, and I know, Your Honor, you know more than I, over both the Obama and Bush preceding administrations, over 16 years, less than half of these kind of stays by the court were put in place than compared to just the past 3 years under the Trump administration. First of all, I think Justice Sotomayor was right to raise the flag here, but more than that, it is amazing in 3 years how the American public has been told, don't trust the judiciary, and we, in the media, the fake news, and every institution that we've learned to count on can't be trusted. But speak to the branch that you know better than almost anyone, the judiciary. What's happening, whether it be a DOJ or the president's attack on it? How concerned are you?
So let me explain exactly how concerned I am. This president has now appointed 1/4 of the federal appellate courts throughout the country, and very close to that percentage of the trial courts. But what he really wants to do is to bypass the district and appellate courts as quickly as possible and get right to the Supreme Court, because he believes that that court has become sort of a weaponized political court in his favor. And that's a tragedy. If he believes, and it may be borne out by the number of 5-4 decisions that have let his policies take place, but he believes that's the court where he can win. So after the trial courts often declare what he's doing to be inappropriate and they stay what he's done, and the appellate court affirms the trial court, he rushes to the Supreme Court to undo what has just been done. And you saw the Supreme Court do it. They did it in the travel ban cases, for example. They've now done it in this stay of the public charge cases, and there are other cases they've done it in a 5-4 manner. So obviously he thinks this court is his friend. And I hope that's not true. I hope the justices are doing what they believe is right, but the appearance right now is troubling.
And I would say to my audience, when you have time, take a look at what has happened to the Ninth Circuit Court here if you want to see how a court can be remade in real time. But finally, to the issue of the circuit courts, my question has been, Mueller rightly or wrongly believed that there was a lot of cases that weren't really in his strike zone when he looked at obviously the considerations, and he farmed them out to some of the district or circuit courts. My belief is that someday we're going to get the answers on Trump inauguration, Trump Foundation, Trump organization, go down the litany. But I am worried, and tell me if I'm wrong, I want to be wrong, that this attorney general, whoever will succeed him, will stifle some of these investigations, and we won't get to the bottom of what we need to know. Will this see the light of day or not?
I think you're right. No, there's only one Department of Justice, Main Justice we call it. Main Justice is in charge of the local U.S. attorneys' offices throughout the country. And if Main Justice decides to kill an investigation, there won't be an investigation. If Main Justice does not authorize a subpoena, there won't be a subpoena. If they don't authorize an indictment, there won't be an indictment. If they won't authorize immunity for witnesses who are willing to talk, there won't be immunity. If they won't authorize a cooperation agreement, which we never saw for Lev Parnas or for Michael Cohen, then there won't be a cooperation agreement. So there's a lot of lawyers out there who are saying, we're already seeing something strange. There should have been immunity agreements. There should have been cooperation agreements. There should have been subpoenas, and they haven't been happening. And you scratch your head and say, now I wonder why that is. So we are worried that the Department of Justice has become very politicized and is more of the president's personal lawyer than the lawyer for all the people.
Your Honor, thank you so much for the time. I have a feeling in the not too distant future there'll be another head scratcher that we'll have to address here, but I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, when we come back here, in the Democratic primary, it's getting late early, as they say, and time could run out on Joe Biden if he doesn't win in South Carolina. We'll discuss that and a whole lot more after the break.